Thank you so much for coming, Mr. Blitz. It's a pleasure to have you. Right after Betty, you're here with us.
Yes.
You're going to talk about economy and also the sell-off, right? First, we thought that the panic that Fed and Bernanke created was subsiding, the panic attack in a way, right?
Yes.
And now, after the three-day rally at S&P and other indices, we see a sell-off. What is the reason for that?
Well, I think there's a lot of different reasons for it. It's awfully hard, but I think the first initial reaction was just all of a sudden everybody thought the Fed was going to start raising rates, and people believed that the equity market was just rising solely because of inflows of capital created by the central banks, and there's some truth to that. But in reality, what's going on is that the Fed wants to simply stop expanding its balance sheet. And that's a very extraordinary means of monetary ease. And if you look at what's going on in the economy right now, it really doesn't need to keep doing that. And in fact, if you're an equity investor and you're thinking about profits, which is why you're investing in a particular company, real yields, in other words, the return on capital without the inflation component to it, should be positive. And so an increase in real yields in the economy is telling you that there's growth that's going to generate the profits that, in effect, you're investing for.
You raised a good point. The balance sheet of Fed, right? It's been huge now, 3.47 trillion, I believe.
Yes.
But do you believe that the tapering will happen this year? Because many people, including PIMCO, Lockhart yesterday, they say that we misinterpreted Bernanke. Did we really misinterpret him? Is he going to start later according to the economy?
Well, he did say it depends on, it's economic dependent, right? So it's dependent on the data that we're getting. But the data we are getting, that we've gotten this week, the data we'll probably get next week when we get the employment data, is saying that he is probably going to start to taper at the end of the year. I think the mistake that the market got to was to believe that tapering meant that we're going to start raising rates, right? So the 3-month Treasury bill right now is effectively trading at a 0 interest rate, right?
That's right.
So if you look at where it's trading on a forward basis, so where it's trading a year from now, it got up to 55 basis points. So the market was all of a sudden believing that the Fed was going to raise the funds rate, right, from 0 to about 50 basis points over the next 12 months. That's wrong. That's not what Bernanke said. That's not what he implied. That's not the direction of policy at the moment. All policy is saying is that, look, we've been throwing a lot of money into the system. We're going to stop slowly, but we're going to stop so that a year from now, if the economic data say it's okay, a year from now, we are going to be no longer putting liquidity into the system. There's a long way from that to saying we're going to start raising the interest rate at the short end of the curve. So we're really many years from that. So
How many years do you think?
I would say probably about 2-3 years.
2-3 years. Okay, that's the interest rates, right? But how about the tapering? Do you think we came to the maturity to start tapering it? Because he took, the unemployment 1 year earlier, right? And inflation, he says, is okay, 2%, and Bullard was against it. But do you believe the targets, in terms of the economic data, came to the maturity? What is your target? Are we really close to Bernanke's targets? Are we going to see the tapering this year?
I think we're going to probably start, I think at the September meeting, he's going to start to put out a schedule for the beginning of the tapering. And I think the economy is going to be good enough. I think that we're probably going to be close to the 7% unemployment rate by year end that he's looking for. This year.
Okay.
And I think that that's going to allow him the room to begin to taper. There's another way to look at this, which I think is probably a little bit more correct in my mind, in that he's pumped so much money into the system, and we haven't really gotten a lot of lift, right? If you look at GDP growth in the United States on a year-over-year basis, every quarter, it's been a mind-numbingly consistent 2%.
Especially this week.
Yeah, it's 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%.
Right.
And so with this consistent 2%, if he keeps putting more money in, he's not going to get any more growth out of it. There are other things that are holding back growth. What's going on in Europe, what's going on in China, the cuts in defense spending in the United States. So these are not monetary policy issues. And if he keeps pumping in money here, what he's going to eventually do, he probably has a little bit, but it'll become more of a problem, is he's going to begin to create misallocations of capital, which is a fancy way of saying bubbles someplace, somewhere. And so that it really makes a lot of sense for him to begin to pull back on pumping money into the system. But like I said, pumping money in is not the same as raising interest rates.
That's right. And I hear you, I think, a little optimistic about the economic outlook. What is your GDP projection for this year and next year?
This year, I'm not a big fan. I mean, I was never a big fan of the idea that the second half of this year was going to be a strong year. But I do think that 2014 can be a very strong year, and it wouldn't surprise me to see a 3.5%, even a 4% real growth rate in 2014. I think the reasons is that a lot of the big declines in defense spending in the United States will be behind us. I think that Europe will probably at least maybe not be shrinking as much, but it may be at least stable. The demographics in the United States start to become more favorable towards growth because we're getting more 25 to 34-year-olds into the marketplace.
That's right.
And as they grow and they go back to work, so that's a very important group because that's the age group where you're the first-time buyer of homes and cars and things like that. So all the things seem to align favorably for 2014. But having said that, it's still a dangerous world out there.
Did the 1.8 surprise you?
No.
What was your estimate? Because Bloomberg economists were thinking about 2.4, 2.6.
Yeah, I don't know why they were, but I was at 2%. I was at 2%, and I'm at 2% again this quarter.
How about China? I'm moving out of the U.S. Are you worried about the liquidity crunch, the crises that's happening? Did they kind of close it, cover it up, but is it still there? Are you expecting anything to come up from there?
I think China's in trouble, and I think China's growth is going to be slow, and it's going to be slow for a long time, right? China made its money basically selling its overproduction into the United States and Western Europe. When the U.S. and Western Europe went into recession, first the U.S. and then Europe, right? In order to keep its country going, it went through a massive fiscal stimulus, and they built everything and everything. You know, we always see these stories about empty cities and all these things. So they spent a tremendous amount of money in anticipation that at some point the U.S. and Western Europe come back and they start buying their overproduction again and everything starts humming. That's not happening, okay? Now, China being China, as opposed to, say, a normal capitalist country like the United States or Western Europe or a free market country, it's very difficult to really understand. You know, when the state owns the bank and the large corporation, and they can basically force labor to go to work, you know, in a lot of situations, it's the same rules don't necessarily apply, right? So it's hard to say, well, the GDP is going to be here, or this is going to be there. First of all, I don't believe any of the numbers that come out of there anyway.
Everyone says that, yes, the numbers are a little...
How can you? I mean, here's a country...
manipulated.
Yeah, I mean, here's a country that will shut down its internet and prevent certain information from getting out to its people, like the anniversary of Tiananmen Square and things like that. So any country that's going to do that, by extension, I'm not going to believe their CPI numbers or GDP or anything else. Everything is manipulated, which makes it very difficult to understand exactly what's going on. But the underlying trend in that country is very clear. Growth is slow, they're overburdened with debt, and they really need to rapidly raise personal income and personal consumption.
Well, thank you so much. I'd like to ask you more about the other emerging markets, including Turkey, but our time is up, and thank you so much for coming again.